Hi everybody, welcome back to English 112 section 2. This is our class for October 19th, which is Tuesday, where we are talking about dramas, specifically Oedipus the King. And I should have returned back your first journal to you about short story. And remember that I was evaluating it informally, just on a checkmark system, where I was reading for content, not for grammar or mechanics, just to give you an opportunity to do a little bit of thinking about three of the short stories in our short story unit. And perhaps those journals can help inform your thinking for our formal paper on short story, which is going to be due on October 26th, which is a Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Via PDF, much like you submitted in your journals, to my email, ruiz@gcc.mass.edu, ruiz@gcc.mass.edu. And while you're working on the paper, hopefully, you've begun now. You don't want to wait until the very ending, as we talked about in terms of writing a paper. We are talking about Oedipus the King, the first play in our three-play drama unit. And I talked a little bit about how the audience would have already known the plot for Oedipus the King, that was something that would be necessary because of some of the limitations that theater goers would have experienced in watching the play in a Greek amphitheater. And that the amphitheaters were basically these large structures that were built into hillsides and stone that could hold thousands of people. And obviously, without things like lighting and without things like electricity, it would be very difficult to see and hear the actors on stage. Hence, there were all kinds of strange theatrical conventions where the actors would wear these large padded costumes that would make them seem larger than life, these large masks that would also help us as audience members differentiate the characters, especially if we were sitting in what I call the nosebleed sections. The mask probably had amplification devices too, to help with volume, though the amphitheaters were known to be marvels in acoustics. So that also helped with the volume. That we would have something called a chorus, and they would be a group of people who would represent the populace, almost like the extras in a movie. But they could also comment on the action. They can much be like narrators, which is somewhat difficult to do with a play. With a short story, let's say, you can always have a character think something, but with the play that's completely dialogue driven, it's a little bit more difficult. So the chorus could act in that way, and they would chant their lines in unison, and it would almost sound like a kind of soundtrack for them. But describing it doesn't really do it justice. I wanted to be able to show you a production that tries to mimic what we would have experienced in 430 BC if we were sitting in that Greek amphitheater. So that production is from 1957, by Tyrone Guthrie. And basically, I can tell you that this particular production has someone in it that's been recently in the news. William Shatner played one of the members of the chorus. You can see him at the very beginning of the play when they're giving a bit of introduction, something that we don't get in the play when we're reading it, but this is supposed to help audiences who are watching the play, where we should imagine ourselves in 430 BC. And obviously, we're not in a Greek amphitheater, and obviously, we're getting things like film close-ups that we would never experience in a theater. But again, you're not watching this play in order to be able to get a sense of the plot, because the plot would already be known. The play starts in media res in the middle, where Oedipus is basically trying to solve a plague in his community, and he's told that with each person that he sends out to try to get the answer, that he himself is responsible for this plague, and he refuses to believe it. And of course, as the play unfolds, we get the truth that Oedipus is indeed responsible for this horrible plague because he has killed his father and married his mother and had incestual relations with her, and she has born children. So how does all of this come about? We find this out through backstory, where basically we're told that Oedipus, as an infant, his biological parents went to the oracle. This is a very common activity during the time of 430 BC Greece. And he basically, the parents are told that Oedipus will grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. So the parents, in trying to prevent this from occurring, have the child killed. They give the child to one of their servants, and they assume the servant will kill the child. But the servant feels pity on the child and ends up abandoning the child on a mountaintop. And the child is found by another servant of another community and taken to that other community. And that king and queen end up raising that infant, whom they name Oedipus, as their own biological child. And never tell him that he was adopted. So when Oedipus grows up to be a man and consults the oracle, again, this was pretty common during the time. Remember, this is a society of gods in the plural. He's told by the oracle that one day he will kill his father and marry his mother. So Oedipus, being a good man, wants to prevent this, so he leaves home and tries to put as much distance between his parents as possible. But he doesn't know that these are not his biological parents, they're his adopted parents. And then it turns out that on a crossroads in his travel, and that's important because it's a literal and figurative crossroads for Oedipus, there's a chariot blocking his way, and in a fit of anger, he kills everyone, and one of the people in the chariot happens to be his biological father. And I once had a student say, I can't remember if I shared this with you or not in a previous class, that this might be the earliest instance of literary road rage, and I couldn't disagree. And then Oedipus comes across a community that has just lost its king. Its king has been killed, and they have a widowed queen, and they're being ravaged by plague. And plague was fairly common during this time. And it's specifically because of a monstrosity known as Sphinx that basically has generated a riddle. There's an old literary tradition of this, of monsters having riddles that need to be solved. And the riddle, which no one is able to solve, is what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 in the evening. Oedipus solves it. Well, no one else can, illustrating Oedipus's intelligence. The answer is man. 4 legs in the morning is a baby crawling. 2 legs in the afternoon is an adult walking. And 3 legs in the evening is an old person walking with a walking stick. So basically, Oedipus's reward for saving the community is that he gets to be king because their king was recently killed, and he gets to marry the queen who's recently widowed. And of course, that queen is his biological mother. They have children, and that gets us back to the beginning of the play where the gods are angry that he has committed incest, he has committed patricide, and ultimately the consequences of that. Everyone figures it out at one point or another prior to Oedipus, which is rather ironic because he's established himself as being so intelligent. But eventually, Jocasta figures it out before Oedipus, and she urges Oedipus not to continue to try to find the truth because she's more concerned with conserving her nuclear family than caring for the populace. But Oedipus, being a good man, cares more about the populace, and regardless of what the truth is, and the truth is pretty horrific. And then when all of it is revealed, Jocasta runs off and commits suicide because she's so overcome with the horror. So she never, really accepts responsibility in the way that a tragic hero should. Oedipus does, however. He comes across Jocasta's body and he takes the brooches off of her and gouges out his eyes. So not only is he punishing himself the way a good tragic hero should, but he also is punishing himself in an appropriate way thematically. He has gouged out his eyes, which have betrayed him. He had physical insight, or he had physical sight, but he didn't have insight. And then at the ending of the play, he has insight, even though he doesn't have physical sight. He's much like one of the prophets that he consults during the play, Tiresias, who is a blind prophet. Again, some irony there that the prophet cannot have physical sight, but yet has insight. And then Oedipus says goodbye to his children because he's shown some mercy by his brother-in-law, Creon, who now becomes the new king. And there's some irony here because Creon is someone Oedipus had accused of trying to steal the kingdom from him. And Creon said, no, I'm quite content with having the privileges of royalty without the responsibilities of being king. But this was another way that Oedipus showed his paranoia, is that he assumed that Creon was making things up when Creon said that Oedipus himself was responsible for the plague, as Creon had been told by the oracles since he went to consult upon Oedipus's orders to see what the reason for the plague was. And then the reality is that Creon shows Oedipus a little bit of mercy, allows Oedipus to say goodbye to his children slash siblings, and then Oedipus wanders off in exile. So that's the play. So now, and I've talked about this in a previous class, and the textbook talks about it as well. So now I leave you to see the production, which is approximately an hour and a half long. And again, for you to experience what you might have experienced in a Greek amphitheater in 430 BC. So grab some popcorn if you don't already have some. And today's attendance question, which will be due on Wednesday, the 20th of October by 10 a.m. But if you need a little bit of extra time, let me know. What did you think of this production, the 1957 Tyrone Guthrie Oedipus the King performance, and why? So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and enjoy Oedipus the King.